Today's deal was provided by Raymond Kim, and it's a 316 unit deal in Texas. So, for these sessions here, we typically use the syndicated deal analyzer for the underwriting. And for anybody who's not familiar with it, we'll just do a quick overview of the tool. The first one is that you'll see different fields that are in blue and in black. The ones in blue are designed to be edited. The ones in black are not. They have formulas in them. Now, that doesn't mean you can't go there and edit the ones in black. You can do that if you want, but just be aware that what's happening as you do so is you're changing a formula that not only affects what you see on the screen, but it may impact something on a different worksheet. And you may not realize that until you're a few sheets in, and then you realize and say, wow, something doesn't add up. And it may be because of a formula you changed. So the moral of the story there is, if you're new, stick with blue. Okay? So today's deal, on the income side, we're going to be focusing on gross potential rent, vacancy, concessions, loss to lease, bad debt, and other income. So for somebody who's been on a few of these sessions, what's the difference in time frame that we look at the income versus the expenses from? And why do we do it that way?
The income is on a T12 and the expenses are on a T3, and the expenses are on a T12 because that's how the lenders look at it.
Yep, very good, Tim. So we always want our underwriting to most closely resemble how a lender is going to look at it. The last thing you want to do is think you have a good deal and the lender thinks something different. So most lenders do look at it with the income on a T3 annualized basis. So we typically do the same for our underwriting. Okay, so we'll take all the income items on the T12. In this case, it's going to be our last 3 months of income items, and that's August, September, and October 2022, columns K, L, and M. And we're going to do a subtotal of those 3 columns for each of the income items. Now, very important, when you have those income items, make sure that you're multiplying them by 4. Because if you don't do that, your totals are going to be very skewed. Okay, so the reason you multiply by 4 is to get an annual total with that 3-month subtotal kind of being the base of it, okay? Does everybody understand why we do that?
No, can you explain it?
Yes, absolutely. So the reason we do the last 3 months and then we multiply it by 4 is because most lenders are going to look at your most recent income. So why do they do that? Because income generally is pretty consistent each month. So you're going to have a fairly consistent income throughout the year, at least in terms of the items. The actual numbers may vary a bit from month to month, but the idea is that the income of the last 3 months is more relevant than something that was 9 or 10 months ago. While they're still going to look at that for historical perspective, they're not going to put as much weight there. So what we do is in our underwriting, we take the last 3 months of all the income items. We do a subtotal, which is just going to give us a 3-month total, and then we multiply it by 4 because it takes that 3-month total and he extrapolates it over a 12-month period.
Okay.
Okay, good. So for gross potential rent, which item or items on the T12 are we going to put in there?
Repeat that again, I'm sorry.
Sure. So for the gross potential rent in the syndicated deal analyzer, which item or items from the T12 are we going to put in there?
The gross.
18.
What's that? Sounds like we have 2 different answers.
18.
18.
Yep, row 18, good. And let's just go through this. I find this is something that often confuses people, especially as they're starting out. So what is the gross potential rent?
That's
want to explain
rent on a rent roll, like the gross potential rent, like if you were to look at the rent roll, like the rents that they have, the total.
So in part, you're right. So let me ask you a question. If you have market rent and effective rent, which one would be your gross potential rent and why?
The effective rent would be the gross potential.
Not quite.
Oh.
What? Why not? So gross potential includes what?
The gross potential would include the
100%.
potential rent that you can get.
Right.
when you raise the rent.
I'm sorry. By effective rent, I thought you meant like the rent that's actually being charged on the property. Effective is what you actually collect, right?
Yeah, so effective is what you're actually getting. So gross potential is like if everything was perfect, if you
Yeah,
had,
yeah, I got you.
yeah.
Yeah, my bad, my bad. Yeah,
That's all right.
Mhm.
Okay, so our total here is 5,581,368.32. Okay, so we have an average rent of 1472. Is that probably a halfway decent property? Do you think you have a decent rented demographic in a property with that type of average rent? Okay, so now just to further clarify, because I realize this is something that often confuses people, who sets this line item here?
Property
seller?
management or the owner?
Right. So does everybody understand that? Because sometimes the term market rent confuses people and they think that it has something to do with the market. Okay, if we don't have any questions on that.
Do the market rents not have to do with what the other rents in the area are?
Nope, nothing at all to do with it. So who wants to explain that further? Because that's an important point that I find a lot of people get confused over that.
I mean, the marketed rent is what they actually getting at the current time, right? That's what they're charging.
No, not really. So what
Okay.
they're getting is the effective rent. That's what Eddie was saying.
Mhm.
So this is in their perception, if they were getting, so let's start with this. Okay, so the management company or the owner or some combination of both set the market rent. So what is market rent?
Charles, I think, isn't that like, for instance, if you have the highest rent that you've got for one of the units that you just say it's a 2-bedroom, 2-bath, the highest rent that you got, some of the other ones are lower, but that's the highest one that you got at that particular time. I think that would be set as the market rent for that.
It could be, but it doesn't have to. So the market rent is what you're marketing a particular floor plan for. So when they say market rent, it's not market like in comparison to other comps, but it's market for that particular property in each floor plan. So let's say if you have a 1-bedroom unit and your market rent, you're marketing that today at, let's just use a random number of $750. So if you're going out and that's what you're marketing it at, that's your market rent. Now, just because I'm marketing a unit or a floor plan at $750, does that mean every lease I'm going to sign is going to be at that price?
No.
Right, why?
Okay, I missed the question. I just hopped back in. You said so you said basically, can you repeat the question, Charles? I just want to make
Yeah.
sure.
So for the sake of example, let's say we have a 1-bedroom floor plan, our market rent is $750. So that means that's what I'm aiming to get on each unit of that type that I'm trying to lease right now.
Yeah.
Does that mean that I'm actually going to get $750 on every lease I sign?
Probably not. If the units, like, you may have some variation between the finishes. I mean, you may have like some partially renovated ones, you may have some fully renovated ones, some classics. So that may fluctuate that actual cost. I mean,
Right.
the actual rent that you get on the unit.
Right. So keep in mind, guys, your market rent is what you're aiming for. Your effective rent is what you're actually getting. Are there times where your effective rent may actually be higher than your market rent?
Yes.
What's that called?
Gain to lease.
Bingo. Very good. So keep in mind, guys, when you're looking at deals and you're looking at actual numbers, your effective rent is really your actual number. So let's just use an example. If I wanted to make this number here $1 million higher, could I do that? And am I falsifying anything by doing so?
No.
You could do it. Yes.
Right. So go ahead. Eddie and Kim, you both answered. Why wouldn't it be falsifying anything if you made that number higher?
Because you're the owner of the property, and you have that right to set your gross potential. I mean, set your market rent at whatever you want it to be. If you feel as though you wanted to get $150 more, you could do that as an owner, and not that, and without that being falsified, because it's your opinion.
Right.
It is.
Bingo. So which of these numbers, if I adjusted them, would I be falsifying?
24.
Right, want to explain why?
That's the effective rent of what they're actually collecting. And so
Right.
that's a set number. It's not a make-believe.
Yep. So keep that in mind, guys. That's something important as you look at deals, because I find that confuses a lot of people. So, you know, if this number here is an actual number, this is what somebody's actually collecting. This factors in your vacancy. This factors in any economic vacancy. It factors in any market rent that you're never going to be able to collect. So this number here, I like to call make-believe rent. You know, you can make it whatever you want it to be. And there's no reason not to do that, you know, if you're selling it. But this number here, this is your actual number, what you're actually collecting. Okay, so
Charles,
yes,
does pet rent or anything like that affect either of these numbers?
no. So that would actually go down here in the other income. So this number up here is really just your base rent and any collection loss that you have. Okay, so let's take a peek here. So our next one, who wants to explain the difference between physical and economic vacancy?
Physical vacancy is like when a unit is actually vacated, like a unit that is rent ready. And I think economic vacancy is like if you have someone in a unit they're not paying, or if you have like a model unit or like some type of employee unit.
Yep, good. So for physical vacancy, which item or items on the T12 are we going to put in there?
Item 25.
Very good. So 228, 928, 92. Okay, so just a little bit north of 4%, not too shabby. Okay, so then for our economic vacancy, our concessions, our loss to lease, our bad debt, which item or items are we putting in there?
22,
Mm-hmm.
23.
Yep. Any others?
24, 19.
24, and what was the last one somebody said? Somebody say row 19?
19.
Yep, absolutely.
Oh yeah.
Okay, so we're gonna put all those items in. So our total there is 598, 824, 72. Okay, so in this case here, what's the biggest portion of the economic vacancy we have?
The bad debt. No, I'm sorry. The loss / gain to lease.
Right, so loss to lease in this case. And what have they been doing at the property throughout the year consistently?
It's been the loss to lease has been increasing.
Right, why is that happening?
Does that mean that they're not hitting their market rents?
Maybe, but what's happening with the market rent?
It's increasing.
Right, they're not leaving it the same too long. So keep in mind, guys, the numbers are a good point, but you want to also understand the context behind the numbers. So one of the reasons that we look at a T12 as opposed to a straight income statement is that the numbers tell you stories. And you'll get more of a story if you're looking at them month to month, because you can see how things are trending. You can see which direction they're moving. Now, is a T12 going to answer all the questions? No, it's probably going to give you a few more, and that's okay. You know, because there's some questions that you're going to need words to fill in. But what's happening is they're pushing the market rent pretty consistently most months. And every time you push market rents, you're going to increase the loss to lease, because you have existing leases that you're not going to be able to renegotiate until they expire. So what happens is you push the loss to lease, and then like this month, the loss to lease started going down in these summer months. So they probably had some leases that expired. They signed them at higher rates, and that's why you started seeing the gap closing a little bit. So could we hit this number and burn this off? Is this an opportunity, or is this a risk?
It could be an opportunity.
Can it be both? Can it be both?
Right. You guys are both right on that. So why could it be an opportunity? But why not?
I mean, it can be an opportunity because if you go in on a loss of lease and you upgrade the apartments, raise the rents and get more people to sign the leases to move in, then you can lower that margin right there.
You could. Now, let me ask you a question. Is it always an opportunity?
No.
No,
Right, why? Go for it, Kim.
Well, the market research comp needs to be done to see what are the current rents, and then that's like the baseline to see if there's room to bump it up.
Right. So keep in mind, guys, is it possible that when somebody's going to sell a property, that they could bump this number higher with the intent of getting somebody to pay for that?
Yeah.
Should they do that?
Mm.
I would tell
Why
you
not?
yes. I would tell you yes.
Yeah, that's
Yeah,
what
why
I'm
not?
Absolutely. If I find somebody stupid who's not going to do their homework and they're going to pay for it, I'm not doing anything dishonest by adjusting this. I would be doing something dishonest if I was adjusting this. But if somebody's going to pay me on this because they didn't do their homework, shame on them.
Yeah, buyer beware, right, Charles?
Right, always. So keep in mind, guys, that happens. Sellers will do that because they figure they may get somebody who's unsuspecting and who's going to pay for it. They don't do their homework. And if they do, shame on them. So,
Charles, I'm sorry to interrupt. Can you explain that little bit of piece again? When
Yeah.
he came in, and yeah, I was kind of a bit confused.
sure. Any specific section or kind of the whole thing?
No, just the section where you said it is not necessarily an opportunity, and you was explaining why.
Right. So that's referring to loss to lease. So loss to lease could be an opportunity, but it could also not be. So as Kim was saying, the key there is knowing the market and knowing what you can really rent these units for. So sometimes what will happen is, you see every month here, these guys are increasing market rent, which is good for them. If they're that bullish on it and they feel they can get it, good for them. Sometimes what also happens is as you're getting ready to sell a property, you start increasing this number because you think that you may be able to find a buyer out there who's going to pay you for it. And if you did, good job as a seller. And if you got a buyer who was willing to pay for it and didn't do their homework, shame on them. This number here is not what you're actually billing out. This is what you're aspiring to get. This number here is the difference between what you're actually billing out and what you're aspiring to get. So the question is, can you close this gap and actually hit this number? And from the financials, there's no way you're going to be able to tell that. You're going to need to do some research in the market and just understand what you can really rent those units for. So always keep that in mind, guys, as you're looking at deals and as you're making offers. While you do want to use the seller's numbers as a starting point, don't take them as gospel. Because a seller could just put for lack of a better term, a fictitious number up here, and they wouldn't be falsifying anything to do that. If they play with these numbers here, then they'd be falsifying something. This number here, you can make it whatever you want. And if somebody pays you for it, then good for you. So you have to know your market and you have to know what you're able to get, because that's going to be a very important thing. Okay, so then when we look at other income, which item or items typically fall into other income? What is other income?
anything outside of the rental income.
Right. So keep in mind, guys, anything that's not rent or rental loss income is going to be other income. So in this case, it's our pet fees, it's our late fees, it's our utility reimbursements, it's our storage fees, all these different things here from rows 29 to 56. These are all going to be different types of other income. So we'll take a total there, and they have 679, 094.68. Okay, so one thing we always want to do is make sure our numbers prove out. So for the effective gross income here, we have 5,432,709, and we have the same thing in the T12, so we're in good shape. Okay, so next thing we're going to do now is we'll move on to our expenses. So in the syndicated deal analyzer, we have items for advertising, contract services, gas and electric, general admin, insurance, legal, real estate taxes, trash removal, management fee, payroll, repairs and maintenance, turnover, and water sewer. So everything we see on the T12 is going to fall into one of these line items. Okay, so the first section we have here is administrative. Is there anything here that we should break out?
Legal,
Yep,
64.
right. So keep in mind, guys, if you're using a different underwriting tool and they don't have a separate line item for legal, you could include that in general admin. But being the syndicated deal analyzer does have a separate line item for it, we usually break it apart. Okay, so then the rest of these items here, these will be general admin items, and we'll put them in our total. So that's 19,602.09. Okay, so next thing we have is insurance. Is there anything here that you break out?
For rental insurance.
Very good. Where should that go and why, Eddie?
Is that income or expense? Is it income?
This one's an expense.
Expense?
So in what instance would it be an expense?
If we're paying for it?
Right. And what do a lot of owners or management companies do?
Oh, okay, I got you. So in this case, they're paying for the renter's insurance and then they're billing it back to the tenants?
That's correct. Yep. So what happens is they're doing it and then they're billing it back, typically, hopefully at a profit, to the tenants. And I see we have a question in the chat box about where to get the syndicated deal analyzer. I'll put that right in the chat box if anybody wants it. Okay, so then, so in this case, when you see the term insurance and underwriting, what types of insurance are typically included in there? Now keep in mind, guys, insurance could be a category all by itself. So we're not going to spend a whole session on that, but from a high level.
Like GL, general liability.
Right. What else?
Is GL the same as property insurance?
Nope. What do they do differently?
I think the GL is like for, if it's like any lawsuits or anything, right? And then the property is like
So to an extent, so for anybody not familiar with insurance, the high level is that general liability covers you in the event of any liability. So if somebody slips and falls in front of the property and they sue you, that's liability. If you have property damage because there's a hailstorm, that's property coverage. So typically when you have your insurance expense for underwriting, it's property, general liability. And if you have any type of umbrella or excess, it would go in there. So the number we're going to put in our insurance total is 181,077.88. And then for the other portion, we're going to throw that in general admin because that's something that we're actually buying and then reselling to the tenants, hopefully at a profit. Now, let me just point one thing out. Not overly important for right now, but just something to be aware of as you start going through, more and more financials. It seems like this property is pretty well run from a high level, but they're paying $13,000 a year in renter's insurance. What are they billing back for it? Who can tell me, looking at this, what did they collect over the last year for it?
Which row is it? I'm trying to find it.
56.
Row 56. Yep. So how much are they collecting on it?
Nothing.
Zero?
That's in the last 3 months, but they did get 24 bucks over the last 12. So they're paying out 13 and they're billing back 24. Is that something you think they could potentially be doing a better job with?
Yeah.
Yeah. So maybe there's some opportunity there. Now, are you going to make huge money on the rent insurance premium? Probably not, but something is better than nothing, isn't it?
So what's the purpose of doing this? They just want the extra hedge, or is it because you think it may be a requirement from the the insurance carrier?
It's two things. So one is you are protecting yourself. So think of it this way. If a tenant's unit gets damaged, what are they going to do most times?
Sue?
Possibly, depending on how much damage, but yeah, very possibly. So if they have renter's insurance, they can go file a renter's insurance claim before they start hitting yours.
Yeah.
So you should really require all tenants to have renters insurance. And what they're doing is they're making it easier for the tenants by offering that solution so they don't have to go somewhere else. And typically what happens is you're paying a premium, so you're paying X number of dollars per tenant, and then you're billing it back to the tenants at X plus 20% or something like that, let's say.
Mhm. Yeah, so they're not doing any bill back at all. Those are probably just some maintenance fees or something. I don't know, like
Right.
rent fees or
So,
something.
so that's something to be capitalized on. I mean, it seems like they're doing from the numbers so far, a fairly good job of running this property, but that's an area they could do a little better on.
Mhm.
Okay, so now we look at our next section here, they're classifying as maintenance. Is there anything here that we should break out?
Maybe gardening.
Yep,
Yeah,
and what else? There's actually two other items in this section I'd break out also.
exterminating services.
Bingo, and one more, go for it, Eddie.
Equipment rental,
I would have said HVAC.
Pool service.
Service.
So the pool service will be the third one. So now let me explain, because somebody said HVAC and somebody said equipment rental. So why the pool service? What's consistent or what's different about these three items: gardening, exterminating, and pool service?
They're monthly
Every month.
recurring.
Right.
Yeah.
So when you have something like that, most times it's going to be a contract service. And that's the difference between a contract service and repair and maintenance, is that the contract service is typically consistent in both frequency and price. Whereas repair and maintenance most times is more one-time in nature. Okay, so then we'll take our three totals and we'll plug those into our contract services. And then the rest of those items we're going to leave in our repair and maintenance total. So for the person who said HVAC, why would we or would we not break that out?
That makes sense when you said that the other things are recurring things that keep coming up versus HVAC is something that you really only pay when it breaks.
Right. Okay, so our total here for repair and maintenance so far is $8,640.79.
I have a question about the HVAC, Charles.
Absolutely.
To that same point, I mean, if you have a maintenance plan or like a preventative maintenance plan around your HVAC units, like if you're going through and changing filters, charging units with Freon like quarterly, could you consider that a contract service? If it's the same frequency, like if you're doing it like
Yeah, if it's consistent and you have like a preventive maintenance program and you actually break it out in your financials, then I'd say, yeah, you could do that.
Okay,
If it's kind of lumped in with everything else, it'll be tough to break out.
got you.
Okay, so then we have, looks like the next item they're classifying as management fees. So what do you guys think? Are these all management fees?
That a folio billing fee, right? Could that be a G&A?
Yep, very good. Is there anything else that should be broken out?
Non-sufficient funds expense?
What should that be?
Should that be like a G&A?
Yep. And which,
Partial payment fees?
yep, very good. Okay, so we'll take our management fee here, $124, $250, and 99 cents.
What is a G&A real quick?
So G&A is general administrative. Typically, anything that's used to run the business of the property, whether it's something that's used for the office, whether it's a service that you're buying and reselling to the tenants, typically at a higher rate, any of those things would fall in general administrative. Okay, so our total here is $6,867.68. Okay, so next thing we have is marketing and advertising. Do you guys agree that these are all marketing and advertising items?
Yeah.
Yeah, I would agree with that too. Our total there is $45,111.19. Okay, so next thing we have is payroll. Do you guys agree that these are all payroll items?
Yeah.
Yep, I would agree with that too. And our total is $228,027.53. So here's the first thing I'm actually gonna point out about this property that catches my eye.
They roll.
Yep, so go for it, Eddie. What is alarming here?
This is substantially lower than typical
Right.
property to size.
Right. Why, Eddie? So give a little more insight. Now, keep in mind, guys, numbers vary from area to area. I will tell you generally across the Southeast, which I guess a lot of people kind of consider Texas part of, and even if you don't, it's still fairly similar in cost to many of them. Where would we be, Eddie, for payroll, in a property with full-time staff usually?
Easily over 1,000 a unit. I'd venture to say, between 1,200 to 1,500 on the high end.
Right. So 1,200 on the low side, guys, per unit. 1,500 if you're in a bigger market, maybe 1,700, 1,800 even. So
Okay.
722 a unit somewhere in the Southeast. The Midwest is generally the cheapest part of the country. I don't even think you can find full-time staff at 722 a unit in the Midwest.
Charles, also like to point out right here too, Charles, and you probably is going to get to it, but the management fees, I would think with a payroll that low, the management fees would be high, but that's also like substantially low too. It's 2.5, less than 2.5, like 3%.
Right. So typically, if you get a management fee that low, okay, so this is a sizable property, it's 316 units. So for anybody who's looked at management companies and dealt with them a little bit, is it typical to get a fee less than 3% and maybe less than 2.5%?
No.
Right. Who usually gets those fees?
Large operators, like substantially large operators.
Right. Either good clients that they have existing relationships with, that they've done multiple deals, or large operators. And when I say large operators, like institutional large. Kim, you have a question?
Yeah, that was my comment, that it could be that this property is part of a portfolio of 2, 3 plus, and so then you have economies of scale, and so then the fees drop a little bit.
Yeah, definitely could.
Yeah.
So usually when you're looking at properties like this, so does anybody think that a group just starting out is buying a 316 unit property in Texas?
No.
Probably not.
Yeah, most cases that's not the case. I haven't looked at the property itself much. I don't know the vintage, but there's a good chance it's probably a well-established syndicator or an institution or an equity group. So it's probably some type of large player that's owning a property like this.
Charles, I'd even venture to say, like for a new owner coming in, you can't go off of these numbers because you're not going to be able to do the same thing here. Like you're not going to be able to operate at that same cost unless you have a large portfolio yourself,
Correct. Yep. And that's something we're going to look at in the pro forma, but that's a good point. So keep in mind, guys, the seller's numbers are a good starting point. They're good for reference, but you can't take them as gospel. So you have to do your own market research, and you have to use your own property managers and your own people. Now, do you want to do that on your initial underwriting? No, because that would take forever and a day. But if it's a deal that has any potential, then you want to be reaching out to the relationships you have to get information for that. Okay, so our next line item here is tax. Some states have a franchise tax, not all of them. So we're just going to lump that into our property tax, and that's $1,022,091.08. And I have to say, anytime I read a tax number that starts with $1 million, it always hurts my heart a little bit. Okay, then for turnover. So we'll throw both of these line items here into our turnover expense. That's $52,1291. Okay, utilities. So in the syndicated deal analyzer, we have separate line items for each of these utilities, so we'll break them out. Electric's going to go in our gas and electric total. Garbage and recycling and Valley Living, we're going to put both of these in our trash removal. That's $79,288.85. Let's just see, for example, being that they weren't really billing back the renter's insurance, let's see if they're billing back the valet trash yet. So they're paying, $30,000 a year for that. 78,000 when you factor in regular trash removal. What are they collecting back? Eddie, you have a question?
Yeah, but it deviates from what you're talking about. I can wait.
Okay. Give it 1 minute and then we'll go right into that. So what are we collecting on trash here?
84,000, I think.
Yes, on a T3 annualized basis, correct. On the T12 basis, they're at 35, but it looks like somewhere along the way they started implementing this. So is this one actually a moneymaker?
Yes.
Yeah, they're at least covering their cost. They're making a few bucks on top of it. So that's kind of serving the intended purpose. Eddie, go ahead. What's your question?
All right. So my question was on the repairs and maintenance expense, right? Can we go back to that other sheet for a second, please? The other sheet?
Absolutely.
Okay, R&M turnover. Okay, so I mean, it's alarming. I don't know if we're missing anything, but this R&M and turnover number is just ridiculously low.
I would agree with that. The fact that the tax bill is pretty much 50% of the expenses leads me to say that a lot of these other things are probably quite low.
So you know, what I was assuming, you know, and you can correct me if I'm wrong, it looks like they're capitalizing a lot of their expenses. Is that what's going on, or like?
It's kind of what I'm thinking. I can't tell you that with certainty. Let's see if they have anything below the line. They don't. Okay. So that would be my gut feeling as well.
Okay.
So who wants to explain what that is? And Eddie, if you want to do it, just go for it. And what you know, what would be the benefit to an owner capitalizing something if they're getting ready to sell a property?
Oh, okay. Owner capitalizing it means it doesn't decrease the NOI, so the value actually, you know, would stay the same or go, it
Right.
wouldn't. Yeah.
So does everybody understand why that's important if a line item doesn't hit the net operating income?
No.
Okay. So at the most basic level, the way you're calculating prices for these properties is you're taking the net operating income and you're dividing it by a cap rate. So if you have $100,000 of net operating income and you're at a 6 cap, let's say that property is worth $1,666,000. But now let's say that I decided to put a few more items below the line. So that means they're still on your financials, but they're not hitting your net operating income. And now my net operating income is 105,000 instead of 100,000. So now my property at that 6 cap, I just gained an additional $80,000, $83,000 in value. So just because it's not included in the net operating income, does that mean it's not affecting your cash flow? Oops.
No.
No.
Right. So keep in mind, guys, for anybody who's newer to this. So there's operating income, operating expenses, non-operating income, and non-operating expenses. So who wants to explain the difference between an operating and a non-operating item?
Operating is property specific, so that's a expense that needs to be incurred to run the property. Non-operating could be sponsor or group specific.
Right.
So, yeah. Okay.
Yep. So keep in mind, guys, operating expenses are generally incurred by anybody who's going to run a property. So let's say if you're self-managing the property, okay, so I used to work for a guy in New York who, you know, did very well for himself. He owned a lot of commercial property and he would self-manage because that's what he did. He was a contractor by trade. So he had guys that were naturally handy on his staff and he would use them to fix things at his properties. So is it possible with that type of setup that he's able to do repairs and maintenance cheaper than we might be able to if we don't have that same situation?
Yes.
Right.
Yeah.
So when you're underwriting it, while you do want to use the seller's numbers as a starting point, you also want to look at how you're going to operate it. Because if I'm not going to operate it the same way, then it doesn't make sense for me to underwrite it from that perspective. So in terms of capitalizing something, the reason you're doing that is because it doesn't hit this net operating income. So it'll still hit this, and it's going to reduce your cash flow available for distribution, but it's not going to hit the net operating income. And this is what's used when you're out there trying to sell a property. Okay, so let's take a peek at the other ones here. So then gas, we have $8.70 and 33 cents. So we're going to plug that into our gas and electric total. And telephone internet, where should that go?
G&A.
Right.
Admin.
And why does that go in G&A?
That's probably a expense that's related to the leasing office.
Right. Okay, so utility management and billing, where's that going to go?
G&A.
Right. What's that for usually?
I can't remember.
Kim, do you want to take a stab at it?
Maybe some sort of a software for billing back utilities or something.
Yeah, and not even software. It's usually a third-party company. So what most companies do is they hire an outside vendor and they go there and determine the amount of each tenant's bill and bill them out. So that's just the fee for that service.
Oh,
And then, excuse me, then the water bill, that's going to go in its own section, 245, 821.12. Okay, so similar to the income, we want to make sure our expenses prove out. So here we're at 2,100,091. And here we're at the same thing. So we prove out we're in good shape. So for now, we're done with the T12, and now we're going to take a peek at the OM. So as we go through the OM, what are we looking for here?
question is to ask the broker.
Right. So keep in mind, guys, you want to go through the information they give you. If you want to come across credible with brokers, take a few minutes and actually go through what they send you. If you ask them questions that you could have easily answered if you had taken 5 minutes to go through this, you look like a fool. Don't look like a fool. Your reputation is valuable. Treat it like such. Okay, so let's take a peek here at the OM. So we have some information on the team that's running the process. And in this case, this particular broker also has a financing team. So if you're dealing with a company that has a finance team, you may as well reach out to them. They're looking at this deal anyway, whether it's for you or anybody else. It's just they work for the company and they're looking at their deals. So they're usually having these quotes ready, and they're oftentimes pretty familiar with it. Doesn't mean that you need to use the team if you don't want to, although it's not a bad idea to usually, but you can get some good information from them because they're already familiar with the asset as opposed to reaching out to your mortgage broker for every single deal. So based simply on the sign of the property, do we think this property is well maintained?
Yeah.
Yeah. Keep in mind, guys, as you're driving by your property, what are the first two things you see that give you a perception of any property?
Curb appeal, signage.
Signage, that's one. And what's the second part of curb appeal, Andy?
Landscaping.
Yeah. Yeah, that's a good one.
So having those things well done before anybody ever gets to look at a unit, they're going to look at those things and they're going to judge that property. So at this one here, what I see already is, okay, we have a nice looking sign. So that's kind of encouraging. Okay, so we have some highlights here on the investment. So it's telling us here, Northmark Multifamily is pleased to present the opportunity to acquire Tides on Westchester, a 316-unit value-add asset located in Grand Prairie, Texas. The 1997 built asset sits on more than 21 acres and features direct access to I-20, which accommodates 190,000 vehicles per day and serves as the main east-west transportation provider in the area. This highly accessible location provides residents with a short commute to the area's top entertainment and employment hubs, including the Grand Prairie Premium Outlets, Lockheed Martin, Airbus Helicopter, Mountain Creek Business Park, General Motors Assembly Plant, the Dallas CBD, the Arlington Entertainment District, and the Fort Worth CBD. Proximity to these robust economic drivers has attracted an affluent tenant base seeking a commuter-friendly location. The immediate area supports nearly 50,000 employees and 4,800 plus businesses. Additionally, median household income in the area is $91,000 plus. The Grand Prairie submarket has directly benefited from this consistent demand, recording year-over-year rent growth of 12.3% while maintaining an average occupancy level above 95%. Tides on Westchester offers a mix of 1, 2, and 3 bedroom floor plans and boasts an impressive average unit size of 854 square feet. 20% of the interiors have been renovated with stainless steel appliances, quartz countertops, white shaker-style cabinet fronts, custom tile backsplash, wood-like flooring, brushed up nickel fixtures and hardware, and upgraded lighting. The community offers a best-in-class amenity package consisting of a resort-style swimming pool, clubhouse, picnic area with barbecue, business center, assigned parking, and beautiful landscaping. This strong amenity package, along with significant capital expenditures targeted to improve interiors and curbside appeal, has created an inherent leasing advantage for the property. So what are they selling this asset on? There's two things that I see. What did you guys get from this?
Oh, like
Location.
Absolutely, location for sure. So
Value add.
A-class area, job opportunities, opportunity to turn over a lot of units because they only did 20%.
right. So, somebody said value add, so even though you're right, it doesn't specifically say that, but as Eddie said, it does say they've only done 20%, so you would think there's more room to go. Now, let's also ask another question. So down below at the bottom of this page, so you'll notice one of the things they talked about was significant capital expenditures. And they give us a breakdown here of what these expenditures are. Little shy of 1.2 million. Is that a lot of money?
No.
Right. Would that be a lot of money for a 60-unit property?
Yeah.
Right. Is that a lot for a 300-unit property?
No.
Yeah.
So just keep that in mind, guys. As you look at it, it's very easy to spend money like that on a property this size very quickly. So while it's not necessarily a bad thing, maybe the property doesn't have a ton of deferred maintenance, which is a good thing if that's the case. But and if I was selling the deal, I would absolutely position it the same way. But just to understand, that type of money on a deal this size really isn't that much. Okay, so now they're showing us some of the renovation premiums. It looks like here they're showing that they have 249 classic units, and they're showing us here on what they're getting for the ones that they've renovated. So, they're showing a $321 spread. Is that pretty sizable?
Yes.
Yeah, I would agree. Now, it looks like they also are getting pretty good growth here. And, they're showing here that they have a lot of new leases, a lot of renewals. In the last 3 months alone, they have 80 leases that were either renewed or signed new. This is pretty encouraging to go from 1077 to 1284.
Yeah.
Yeah. Do we think we're going to be able to do this every year?
No.
Right. Eventually, if you keep doing that, you're not going to have any tenants because nobody will be able to afford it. It is very encouraging. You should do it while you could, but just be aware that you should not be using 19% year over year in your underwriting. Consistently, anyway. I mean, if you're doing a value add initiative, it's one thing. But if you're going there and that's your plan, you probably want a different plan.
Charles.
Yep.
Question. So can we go back to that rent page real quick?
Absolutely.
So the average rents right now, you're saying is around like 1284. I just call it 1300, right?
Yeah, for the classic ones, yep.
That's about like 47,000 a year, but we're saying the average household is 91, right?
Right.
I mean, what's your thoughts on that?
My thought is I would push as far as we could until people complain.
Okay, got you. Yeah, we have the same thing. Yeah.
My general rule of thumb is if people aren't complaining, we're not pushing high enough.
Yeah, because I think that's the indicator. I think didn't you point out the fact that they had like a good amount of retention there? Like they had like 80 or was it 80 people that left?
Well, they did have 60 that renewed at mostly higher rates, it would look like. Looks like 20 that left. So 25% isn't that bad. Yeah, to be honest, in most multifamily properties, you're probably going to lose 50% of your tenant base every year.
Mm-hmm.
The only way you're not going to lose that many is if you're leaving rents flat and you're not pushing them. But if you get aggressive with rents, there's just no way you're keeping that many people.
Mhm.
So they're obviously doing something right to retain these people. Now let me ask you a question, and this may be a matter of preference, but just to get some different perspective, because it's always good to hear. Would you rather have a tenant renew who has a rent here at 1077 and 1284, or would you rather lose them, upgrade a unit, and then sign a new lease?
Lose them.
What's that?
Upgrade.
What's the business plan? Is the business plan to hold the property or syndicate it?
Well, let me ask you a question. To me, it doesn't make a difference. My business plan is to make money. I don't care if I'm gonna
Yeah,
hold or syndicate it.
I say upgrade.
So, anybody else have a different thought?
To what extent? Like,
I
are we
probably would
putting
have
them
leaned
out?
towards keeping the tenant on a renew. But I'm very new to this,
I-
so
No, Madison, I agree with you. That's my thought too. So I was just curious to see what different perspectives were. So,
I may be reading too much into it. I mean,
what's
I think
that?
I said I may be thinking too deep into it. You know, my concern was like a lot of people leaving, but I think you just just like apples to apples, just that one person. Yeah,
So-
I agree.
So keep in mind, that's where it's gonna come down to knowing your market well.
Mm.
So, if people aren't able to easily find a cheaper unit in that area, or at least not one of comparable quality, they're probably not gonna leave. Now, if you totally push above where they could pay, then they'll probably leave. But if you don't, they're probably not gonna leave. So let's just say if somebody's paying 1077 and you hit them with the renewal of 1284, are they probably gonna curse you?
Yeah.
Probably. But if they go on Google and they go on apartments.com and they go on Zillow and they start looking for apartments in the area and they say, wow, this is what everything's going for. Do you think they're gonna stay?
Yeah.
I do too.
I think it's like you said, it depends. I was definitely looking at a property in Greensboro, and I was just looking at like the renter reviews, and the person was like, well, it was fine when the rents were low, but now that they're comparable to everywhere else, this place is not worth that. I can get a better place for the same price.
Yeah, and it's important to offer service, so that's true. And that's regardless of what industry we're in, right? So whether it's properties or selling widgets, you want to offer good service, because if you don't do that, it doesn't matter what price you charge. But if you give people service and you address their work orders and you do things in a timely fashion, personal opinion, but I would tell you, you'd be much better off keeping the unit occupied, not having the vacancy. So with all the inflation that we've had in the last year, does anybody here think it only affects rents, or do you think it might affect everything we're paying on the expense side too?
Yeah, the expenses.
Yes, everything.
Right. So for a turn that would have cost $5,000 last year, what's it probably costing this year, Eddie?
Like 775.
I would tell you even more than that in some cases. So in most cases, the turns are costing more than people are budgeting for, because things have went up so rapidly. And things are taking longer and longer to get. Thankfully, we are seeing some normalcy return to supply chains. But Eddie, I know you do some of this in your properties. Do you find that you have delays on anything still? 2.5 years, almost 3 years into the pandemic?
You say delays on rents?
Well, no, delays on getting supplies. When you're turning units, do you find that everything's ready and available on day one when you start to turn those units?
Well, I mean, most of my portfolio is smaller units. I think our like supply issues probably aren't the same as like the larger units.
Okay.
What I would say is this, like definitely we've had to have a variety of finishes because one type of material isn't in
Right.
stock anymore or available anymore. So we have to like,
You have to get creative.
yeah, agreed. Yeah. You're right.
So I've been seeing that a lot on my end, getting appliances, getting windows, things are tough. And sometimes you can get appliances, but I can't get windows. Other times I can get windows, I can't get appliances. And, that happens in a lot of cases. So, what that means is, to me, if you can keep a tenant in there and get a substantial rent bump and have no vacancy and not have that risk, I would do that all day long.
Quick question, Charles. I mean,
Yeah.
this is something that we're considering too, like to push closer to market rents, like on those existing units, potentially like offering the tenant, like 2 options to renew. maybe it's like a partial renovation to the unit to try to bring it closer to, the totally renovated units, to try to get them like closer. And when I say that, like, we're talking like things that you could do in a unit without disturbing the tenant too much, like fixtures.
That's what I was gonna say. It's important you point that out for an occupied unit, but yes.
Yeah. Fixtures. I'm not like paint or anything. Fixtures, or maybe like a deep carpet cleaning or something like that. Do y'all do anything similar to that? Like, or no?
I think those are good incentives. We don't personally. So our general rule is to go out there and test the market and see how far we can go.
Okay.
And, you know, you can usually tell pretty quickly when you get into a property how receptive the tenant base is going to be versus how resistant they're going to be.
Okay.
So if people are receptive, we keep going until we get resistance.
Okay.
And, we don't necessarily want the mass exodus at the property, but the goal is to increase the revenue as much as we can by spending as little as possible.
Gotcha.
And if we're able to do that by renewing and getting a significant bump based on that, we're absolutely going to ask every single time.
Okay.
Charles, would the rent bumps depend on the asset class? And so like this is a built in 1997, a B asset, and then renovated in 2014. So possibly this is now like an A- property. And so the folks who live here are white collar workers. And so the increases of $50, $80, it doesn't really matter to them.
A lot of times I don't find it'll make that big of a difference. So most times somebody moving into a 1997 property is probably a decent tenant demographic. They're probably somebody who doesn't want the excessive bells and whistles that these newer luxury properties have. And because of that, they do want to be maybe at a slight discount in comparison to that. So otherwise they would just move into the newer luxury building and have, a billiards room and a pool and all these different things that, modern properties have. So more than anything, I would tell you, more than the asset class, it probably just depends on what's out there on the market. So if you see other properties of similar quality and vintage getting substantially higher rents, then there's a good chance you can too. And you want to be cognizant of what your competition is getting. There's different schools of thought. Personally, I don't mind being the highest rent in the area, for whatever vintage or asset type that we're looking at. It's not necessarily that we try to, aim for that, and I wouldn't underwrite for it, but, I wouldn't let it scare me away if we were having success with that and pushing for it. So, the goal is to get as much as you can. And I think it's just knowing the market and seeing how far you can really push. And that's going to take some studying and researching of the market just to understand where those, where the similar properties are.
I see. Thank you.
You're welcome. And let's take a peek here. So we have some more information throughout the OM. So with this stuff here, we're talking about some of the value add summary. They're telling us here that we could continue the interior enhancement program on the remaining units, construct fenced yards around the first floor units, install water saving devices, smart tech packages, washer dryer equipment. So, and they also give us kind of a budget for what each of these things would look like. So this will actually be helpful as we put together our CapEx budget in a little bit. So we'll come back to this. Okay, so we get some more information on the area. For everybody not familiar with the Dallas area, obviously it's one of the more desirable locations in the country. So a lot of things to like about it. During these sessions, we don't spend a ton of time on the areas. We spend more time on the property related stuff itself. The area is far more important than the deal, but I would tell you to go out there and start, learning about the area before you really spend time looking for deals there. Okay, we get a site plan over here, and then we also get our unit mix. So I always like to jot down the unit mix in the target rent analysis chart here on the scenario sheet. It doesn't necessarily do anything for the underwriting, but it's a good bird's eye view of the unit mix and our starting and target rents. So here we have 144 one bedroom, one bath units. On the 2.2s, we have 136 of those. And then on the 3.2s, we have 36 of those. What do you guys think? Is this a decent unit mix?
Yes.
Yeah, I would agree with that. Okay, so they're showing us some more data here on the current rents and also potentially where we could push to. We're not going to focus on that right now. We'll kind of come back to that as we get a little further in the session. Some basic specs on the property, ample parking, which is good. All 2- and 3-story buildings. Looks like they replaced the roofs in 2014 and 15. So right now we're going to be approaching 2023 soon. Do you think that means we may need to replace a roof? Do we have any more questions? We'll wrap up